So let me sit you down and walk you through what has been unfolding, because things have gotten far more tangled and troubling than anyone expected. What started as whispers about leaked footage has turned into a full-on storm that is hitting Diddy from angles he probably never imagined possible. And the more people speak out, the more complicated the whole picture becomes. What we're seeing now is not just one person coming forward, not just one rumor spreading, but a chain of events that shows just how messy everything around Diddy's situation has become. And it all really kicked off when the person who had been filming him, this documentarian named Michael Olize, finally put out a statement. Now, I may not be saying his last name exactly right, but Michael is the man who had been working directly on what was supposed to be Diddy's documentary. He described himself as Diddy's documentarian, the one in charge of capturing hours and hours of footage over multiple days. According to him, this footage that is now circulating everywhere did not come from him. He said it didn't come from anyone who was supposed to be touching or handling Diddy's material, either. In fact, what he said was pretty simple. He stepped away for 3 days. Just 3 days. And while he was out of state, he had a third party fill in for him. Someone who was supposed to cover the job, watch over the equipment, and keep the project running smoothly until he got back. And that person, according to Michael's statement, is the one who took the footage and leaked it. Not for creative reasons. Not because of some heated argument or contract fight. Not because they were angry. According to Michael, it wasn't about a payment dispute at all. It wasn't about someone being upset with Diddy or demanding more money. He made it very clear that he had been paid, that the project was in order, and that there were no arguments behind the scenes. Instead, he called the person who leaked the footage unethical. He said this individual had acted without integrity, taking footage that was supposed to be for a documentary and handing it over to outside parties who had their own agendas. And when he said that, it immediately raised the question, who in the world was this third party? And why were they even given access to so much? Michael's statement made the situation sound almost surreal. Imagine working on a project for weeks, maybe months, believing your footage is safe, only to come back and find that someone who was just supposed to fill in for a couple of days had taken 140 or 150 hours of material and slipped it to Netflix and even 50 Cent. And the thing is, Netflix was already interested. So was 50 Cent. Everybody knew that. The documentary, the story, the criminal case, this is all huge news. And this third person must have known exactly how valuable that footage was. If they wanted fast money, it would not take long to find big buyers. Netflix and 50 Cent were definitely ready to take a look. And they did. What makes this worse for Diddy is that this means he had someone he didn't even know was a risk, right inside his circle, handling his footage at one of the most sensitive times in his life. While he was already drowning in legal problems, already dealing with lawsuits, already facing a criminal trial, this person got their hands on essentially the raw, unfiltered look at his life and everything around him. Whoever this person was, they saw an opportunity to cash out and take advantage of the fact that Diddy didn't have tight control over who was substituting for Michael. If you think about it, it's almost one of the biggest betrayals you could imagine. Not a friend turning against him, not someone suing him years later. This was someone who had access to private recordings intended for a documentary, someone Diddy might not have even known personally, walking off with hours upon hours of footage. And the strangest part is this question. How did they even move all that footage? You can picture it. Long nights of uploading files, plugging USB drives into a laptop, copying massive folders, maybe transferring things to an external hard drive, slipping the drives into a bag, and then walking out with it. But was any of that technically illegal? That's the difficult part, because that depends entirely on the contract. If Michael forgot to include something in writing, if he didn't sign something that said the footage couldn't be moved or copied or taken by a substitute worker, then the situation gets very muddy. And Netflix must have checked all of this first, because they're not going to put themselves at risk. They are a major corporation. They don't just gamble on something like this. In fact, when Diddy's camp put out a cease and desist letter basically warning Netflix that the footage was stolen and threatening legal action, Netflix actually responded and said the claims were false. They insisted that the footage had been obtained legally. They did not engage in any shady deals. They did not manipulate anyone. They made it clear that they were not tied to any earlier conversations that Diddy's team may have been worried about. They didn't show fear. They didn't back down for even a moment. And that's why a lot of people are saying that Netflix must have checked everything with lawyers first. making sure that if Diddy did decide to sue them, he wouldn't have much to stand on. And that brings us back to Michael's statement. Some people actually think that he didn't just come out to tell the truth, but that he was pushed into doing so, and honestly, that is possible. Just because Diddy is in jail doesn't mean he's powerless. It doesn't mean he's cut off from communication. People around him still take his calls. People still act on his behalf. And according to what some people are saying, Diddy never paid the person. And that's why they leaked the footage, but Michael came out and said that wasn't true. He said there were no money problems, and the timing of his statement is suspicious to some people, because it comes right when Diddy's team is trying to control the narrative. It's not impossible to imagine someone calling Michael and telling him to set the record straight in a way that makes Diddy look more responsible or more in control. But here's the shocking part. Even with this statement, none of it actually helps Diddy. Nothing in Michael's words makes the situation easier. If anything, it confirms just how bad things are, because it proves that the footage was leaked from inside Diddy's own people. Someone who was right there made the choice to hand over content that Diddy absolutely did not want the public to see. So if Diddy was already dealing with lawsuits and criminal charges, now he's facing a full-on media disaster that is putting parts of his private life out there in ways he cannot undo. And the idea of him suing Netflix for $1 billion, one of the biggest defamation lawsuits in modern times, that's an entirely different can of worms. And the thing is, as wild as that lawsuit would be, many people believe that Diddy would lose. Not because he doesn't have money, not because he doesn't have lawyers, but because Netflix is massive. They're powerful. They know exactly how to protect themselves. They've taken down lawsuits before. And when Diddy went after NBC and other entities earlier, nothing happened. Those lawsuits barely moved. They didn't go anywhere because these corporations aren't afraid of him. They're much larger, much stronger, and far more prepared than one man, even if that man was once a giant in the entertainment world. Meanwhile, Diddy is not living the life of someone who can put major companies in their place. He's in prison. Fort Dix, a place he does not control. A place where he's gotten into trouble for sneaking alcohol in, getting caught on three-way calls, and even having his own prison time extended. He's not in a position of power, no matter how much he wants to pretend he still is. If he really were as powerful as he believed, none of this would be happening. Cassie's lawsuit would have disappeared quietly. His criminal case would never have moved forward. There would be no documentary. There would be no leaked footage. He wouldn't be sitting behind bars right now wondering how someone from his own circle managed to betray him in such a devastating way. As all of this was unfolding, something else started happening that added even more weight to the situation. While Diddy was dealing with his own legal battles and the fallout from this leaked footage disaster, 50 Cent was quietly winning on multiple fronts. It almost feels like life is showing two completely different paths at the same time. One man sinking deeper into problems, and another rising higher in both business and entertainment. At the same time that these leaks were hitting the news, 50 Cent was already in the middle of releasing his own documentary series, and that alone was bringing him a tremendous amount of attention. People were tuning in, sharing clips, talking about it online, and spreading it across social media. And then, when he suggested that he had even more footage coming, footage nobody expected to ever see, it caused an even bigger reaction. It was like fuel being thrown onto an already burning fire. If the documentary had already been doing well, this extra footage pushed it into a whole new level. And the success didn't stop there. Because of all the interest in his documentary work and the constant attention on Diddy's situation, 50 Cent's music started rising on the charts again. Even older songs were suddenly streaming more. People were revisiting tracks they hadn't heard in years. Some people were listening out of nostalgia, others because 50 Cent was back in the cultural conversation, and others simply because they saw his name trending and wanted to check out his old hits. Whatever the reason, he started making a lot more money from streaming. And when an artist's streams increase like that, they earn additional income without having to lift a finger. It just rolls in. On top of that, his TV projects were doing extremely well. One of them, a show with a crime and gang theme, was getting strong reviews and high viewership. Some people say it's called Gangland, but even if the name shifts depending on who you ask, the results are the same. The show is performing at a level most producers can only dream of. So while Diddy is sitting in prison trying to convince people he can take down companies like Netflix or NBC, 50 Cent is out here stacking win after win, building new opportunities, and watching his projects grow bigger by the day. The contrast is almost uncomfortable. On one side, Diddy is in a federal facility fighting for appeals, dealing with legal teams and reacting to leaks. On the other side, 50 Cent is on red carpets, in boardrooms, and getting congratulated by fans and colleagues. It paints a picture where one man's downfall becomes another man's rise, and that's not something people often see so openly. But back to Diddy's situation, because as messy as everything already sounded, it becomes even more tangled when you look at the legal side of it. Diddy wants to speed up his appeal, hoping to have it heard sooner rather than later. Reports say he's aiming for the spring, around April or May of next year, for the appeal hearing, which could last anywhere from a few days to maybe a week. In that hearing, judges will decide whether he has grounds to walk out of prison right then and there, or if he must stay where he is. But most people looking at the situation believe the appeal will be denied. And it's hard to argue with them, because appeals are not about retrying a case or reevaluating every detail. Appeals require the defendant to prove that something was handled improperly in the first place. They're very technical. They're very strict. And most appeals fail, especially when someone is facing the level of evidence that is said to be involved in Diddy's case. His team can argue that the leaks damaged his reputation, or that Netflix posting new footage biased the public, but an appeal judge won't factor in any of that. They'll only look at the original court process. They'll examine whether any legal mistakes were made. And based on everything that has been reported, the government has been very careful from the beginning. That's why many people think Diddy will stay in prison longer than he expected. Some believe he'll remain there long past the 3-year period he initially hoped for, especially with his behavior behind bars becoming a talking point. The reports about him sneaking alcohol into the facility, getting involved in unauthorized communications, and having his time extended because of those decisions. Those things don't help him. Not at all. When someone asks the court for leniency or mercy, the court looks at everything. They look at the behavior, the attitude, the level of compliance. Someone breaking rules inside prison doesn't create a strong argument for an early release. And this brings us back to the documentary. It is remarkable how much damage one leaked project can do. Think of a pot boiling over on a stove. When the heat gets too high, the water spills all over, making a mess on every side. And no matter how you try to wipe it clean, something new keeps bubbling up and spilling out again. That's what this whole situation feels like. Every time one issue is dealt with, another one starts. Every time someone tries to stop the leaks, someone else brings new footage out. Every attempt to control the story only exposes more layers. Nobody expected 50 Cent's documentary to explode the way it did. People anticipated interest, sure, but not a cultural moment like this. Not something that would take over headlines for weeks. Not something that would expose new details every few days. And certainly not something that would create a situation where major companies like Netflix are now making business decisions around Diddy's personal life. The documentary didn't just shine a light on Diddy's past. It created a ripple effect that is now impacting his present and even his future. Because the more footage comes out, the more people feel entitled to talk about him. The more people talk, the more attention the legal case gets. And the more attention the legal case gets, the harder it becomes for him to control the narrative or paint himself as someone who was unfairly targeted. That's why the idea of suing Netflix seems so unbelievable to many people. The lawsuit would be massive, one of the largest defamation cases in history. It would reach headlines everywhere. It would bring lawyers, judges, reporters, cameras, and spectators. It would be a public spectacle unlike anything we've seen in a long time. And while Diddy may think he can walk into such a fight and win, others believe he would crash into a wall. Netflix is not a small operation. They have legal teams that operate globally. They know how to structure contracts. They know how to protect themselves from liability. They can afford to spend years in court without feeling any financial strain. Meanwhile, Diddy's resources are shrinking. Legal fees, lawsuits, settlements, investigations. The cost of maintaining a defense team like his is enormous. And that's before you even get to the fact that his reputation is already damaged. When someone sues for defamation, they must prove their reputation was harmed by false information. But if your reputation is already suffering from separate legal matters, it becomes harder to argue that any single documentary caused the damage. And there's another thing. Diddy is not in a position of power anymore. He doesn't have the same influence he once had. The entertainment industry isn't circling around him. People aren't afraid of him the way they might have been years ago. Corporations aren't stepping aside for him. And if he truly had the kind of power he believed he did, none of this would be happening. He wouldn't be facing these lawsuits. these leaks wouldn't exist. Netflix wouldn't be releasing episode after episode. And he certainly wouldn't be in a federal facility worrying about someone else taking advantage of a temporary substitute videographer. It all comes down to this simple reality. Diddy thought he was bigger than the system, bigger than the industry, bigger than the people around him, bigger than the game. But the truth has become painfully clear: he isn't. And that realization seems to be hitting him in the harshest way possible. Now, as all of this is happening, and as the world watches this situation unfold layer by layer, people are starting to ask questions about the deeper meaning behind all of it. They're wondering how someone on Diddy's level could end up surrounded by people willing to betray him, people willing to take footage, hand it off to outsiders, and cause him this kind of chaos. When you look at it closely, you realize this wasn't something planned or organized by his closest confidants or the people who had been with him for years. This wasn't a friend turning against him. It wasn't an artist he mentored or someone he had a long personal relationship with. It wasn't even a staff member who worked for him every day. It was simply a man filling in for 3 days on a video project. A substitute. Someone most people wouldn't even think twice about. And that's part of what makes this so surprising. The biggest blow didn't come from someone Diddy trusted deeply. It didn't come from a person who knew his secrets. It came from someone who barely knew him at all. A temporary worker who was able to walk in, handle his footage, and walk right back out with hundreds of hours of sensitive material. This tells you something about how fragile the structure around Diddy had become. The safeguards weren't there. The protective layers weren't there. There were cracks everywhere, and through one of those cracks this person slipped right in, took what they wanted, and then slipped right back out before anyone even realized what was happening. When we talk about betrayal, most people imagine something dramatic, a major friend turning on you, or someone you trusted for years revealing your secrets. But betrayal also happens quietly. Sometimes it comes from small openings left unattended. And in this case, those 3 days when Michael stepped away were enough time for someone else to completely change the course of Diddy's life. The most interesting thing is how carefully this third party seems to have covered their tracks. It appears that they didn't just scoop up the footage and dump it somewhere recklessly. They must have done their research. They must have checked what they could legally get away with. They must have made sure that the way they transferred or sold the footage wouldn't put them in direct danger. And when Netflix says the footage was obtained legally, it suggests that whoever leaked it made sure that Netflix wasn't knowingly buying anything stolen or violating any contract. They likely presented the material in a way that made it look above board, and Netflix probably verified that they wouldn't be at risk if they moved forward with using it. This is what makes the situation so painful for Diddy's team. They can't simply turn around and sue this third person. They can't easily point to a law that was broken. They can't claim stolen property unless the contract included something very specific. And since Michael himself is admitting that no payment issues or disputes took place, it makes the argument even weaker. If anything, Michael's statement protects the third party, even though he intended to condemn them. That's why Diddy's team attempted the cease and desist with Netflix. They needed to make a strong move, something bold that would show that they were taking action. But Netflix's response was swift. They were firm and completely confident. They said the claims were false and that the footage was legally obtained. They didn't apologize. They didn't stall. They didn't show any sense of fear. And when a massive corporation responds like that, it usually means they already consulted their legal department and know they're in the clear. So where does that leave Diddy? It leaves him with very little leverage. And that's what frustrates him the most. For years, he operated with power. He made decisions without expecting pushback. He believed he could shape narratives, manage scandals, settle lawsuits, and keep his world under control. But now, sitting in a cell in Fort Dix, watching everything spin outside his control, he's realizing that the world doesn't bend for him the way it once did. From what's been reported, he is anxious, furious, and feeling betrayed. And while those feelings are understandable, they don't change the legal landscape he's in. Even if he files the billion-dollar lawsuit against Netflix, he would be stepping into a courtroom where his chances are slim. The entertainment world has changed. Corporations aren't afraid of celebrities anymore. Public dynamics have changed. Big names don't intimidate the system the way they used to. Meanwhile, 50 Cent continues taking advantage of every opportunity presented by this moment. The huge spike in views, the increase in streams, the strong performance of his TV shows. All of it is pushing his career forward at a time when Diddy's is sliding backward. And it's not because 50 Cent created Diddy's downfall. It's because Diddy's downfall created a wave of interest that 50 Cent was already prepared to ride. He had the documentary ready. He had the production work ready. He had the momentum ready. With so much attention now on him, he's reaping the benefits almost effortlessly. And while this may feel unfair or even cruel to some people, it's also simply the reality of the entertainment industry. When one major figure falls, space opens for another one to rise. And 50 Cent is proving that he knows how to move strategically, how to stay focused, and how to build a story that captures public interest. But through all this, the most striking element of the entire situation is the human aspect. Think about Diddy in that prison cell, realizing that someone he barely knew changed his life more than any rival, enemy, or ex-partner ever could. This wasn't a carefully orchestrated takedown. It wasn't a years-long plan. It was a moment of opportunity that someone saw and took advantage of. And now Diddy's fighting the consequences of that choice. Even if he manages to make it to his appeal hearing next spring, things don't look good for him. The appeal system is not designed to grant easy forgiveness. It's not about sympathy. It's not about whether someone's life has gotten worse. It's about the original legal process and whether something was fundamentally wrong with it. Appeals frequently fail even when defendants have far more favorable conditions than Diddy. His behavior behind bars, the leaking footage, the constant public attention, none of that works in his favor. And if his appeal is denied, he will be forced to stay where he is for much longer than he expected. That fear alone may be fueling his desperation to sue, to fight back, to reclaim some form of control. But the real world doesn't bend to desperation. It bends to evidence, procedure, and structure. Watching all of this unfold feels like watching a domino line fall. One piece tips over another, and before you know it, an entire chain has collapsed. It's overwhelming for people covering the story. It's overwhelming for viewers. And it's certainly overwhelming for anyone trying to keep up with the rapid flow of updates. Every time you think things can't get more intense, something else spills over, another pot bubbling on the stove, another detail from the leaked footage emerging, another response from Netflix or 50 Cent making headlines. By the time this chapter reaches its end, whether that end is an appeal decision, another documentary release, or the potential Netflix lawsuit being filed, it's clear that this whole saga will be remembered as one of the most dramatic periods of Diddy's life. And perhaps the most painful part is that much of it wasn't caused by enemies or longtime rivals, but by a quiet decision made by a substitute videographer over those 3 days when Michael stepped away. When you reflect on that, you realize how fragile the structures around celebrities can be. One oversight, one gap, one moment of trust placed in the wrong person, and everything can shift. This situation wasn't just a leak. It was a reminder of how quickly a controlled life can unravel when the smallest detail goes unnoticed. And now that the footage is out, the damage can't be undone. The public has seen it. The streaming platforms have it. The media is distributing pieces of it. And people are talking. Every passing day spreads the story further. And no cease and desist letter, no courtroom argument, and no public statement can pull all of that back in. At the end of the day, all we can do is watch the next step. Maybe Diddy really will sue Netflix. Maybe the appeal hearing will go exactly how he hopes. Or maybe, as many predict, the situation will continue slipping further out of his hands. But however it plays out, this chapter will be one that people talk about for years. A turning point, a cautionary tale, and a moment when everything Diddy tried to control finally broke loose. Here is a strong closing call to action written in a calm, clear tone suitable for a US audience ages 65+. If you've made it this far, thank you for spending your time with me today. Stories like this keep unfolding, and the only way to make sure you don't miss the next major update is to stay connected. So if you found this breakdown helpful or eye-opening in any way, go ahead and hit the like button, because it truly helps the channel reach more people who want the truth without the noise. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you'll be the first to know when the next chapter in this situation comes out. Your support means more than you know, and it keeps this channel going. I appreciate you, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.